Welcome in. It's week 16. We are at the end of the season here. We are the Footballguys DFS Show. We're going to take a look at the DraftKings main slate, look at our cash game plays, look at our GPP plays. Kind of looking at the end of the season here. We're getting some random guys pop up out of nowhere. We're getting surprise changes at the quarterback position. We're a little bit off routine here. We're recording a day early, so still some news out there that we might not have at this point in time, but the same team is always here. Myself, Jeff Bell, Devin Knotts, and Phil Alexander. And we're going to dive in here, but first we're going to talk about the optimizer, the single game optimizer that we did here at Footballguys. Great tool. And Devin, why don't you take that away?
Yeah, second week that we've had it officially live. It's been live for a couple weeks for those that are on Twitter, but it's free through the end of the year. I know some people seem to have had some feedback or questions, and we're addressing all of those. So if you do have questions, feedback, concerns, issues, just email me, knots@footballguys.com, and we can get that thing sorted out. It does seem to be running a little bit better on Chrome than it does on other browsers, but if there are any issues, let us know, and we're actively working on fixing any bugs. But yeah, it's a really good tool to just kind of quickly build a lineup, build the showdown slates are a lot of fun, and especially as we get into the playoffs and we get deeper into the playoffs, the contest sizes get quite large. So as DFS winds down, the showdown season kind of goes up. So really a tool that can help you build optimal lineups and really get creative on some of the mixes that you can build there. So we'll put the link down in the comments again this week. But if you have any questions, feel free to either post in the comments or again, email me.
Yeah, I like those single game slates. Obviously, during the primetime windows, they get a lot of attention, but they're fun during the afternoon too. You can grab some random games if you're feeling good about this particular matchup. You can enter contests there too, and so I think that those are a lot of fun as well. Phil, how are you doing tonight? Are you just ready to look at some of these games of the week here with week 16 coming up?
Can I just toot my own horn again?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just the knower of bad. I'm the knower of bad football.
You are
you don't see that Browns helmet up there without knowing what bad game is going to go over. And that Houston Arizona game, it wasn't even a question; it was going over.
Yeah, you get some of these big leads, and then Arizona was able to push back. I don't think Arizona cares anything except for getting Trey McBride the most receptions he possibly can get, getting the most yards for Jacoby Brissett, getting Michael Wilson and turning him into obviously the fantasy wide receiver one over the last 5 weeks. But they're not particularly competitive football teams, so you nailed it, Devin. You were all over it, and I threw out British Brooks. I was right, but I was wrong. It was not Dario Gumbawala. It ended up being Jawar Jordan. But so my advice was absolutely worthless, even if I was half right in the right direction. But we can, I'm sure we can find some slop on the slate as well that Devin will tell us, the 37-point total that will end up being 65 points. But we can dive through here and see what we can find. Phil, what are you looking at in week 16?
Yeah, if we're looking at games with 37-point totals, we got to go pretty far down the list because there's a lot of games this week that look like they have some pretty good scoring potential. The one that I was looking forward to the most might be ruined by Quinn Ewers. We found out today that Miami is moving on, at least this season, from Tua. Now we've got a 7th-round rookie making his first start in the equation in this Bengals at Dolphins game. The total dropped by 3 points, mostly on the Dolphins' end, but it's still got a total of 47.5 points. The Bengals are favored by 3.5. That's still a respectable total in a game that I guess Vegas at least thinks could still potentially go back and forth. So we'll mention it. Definitely some pieces that we are going to like, I think. Chargers at Cowboys might be the game of the week. Cowboys 2.5-point favorites, highest total on the slate there, over under 49.5. Quinnen Williams is in the concussion protocol, by the way, so we might actually see like a full regression of Dallas's defense in that game, and maybe the Chargers with their shoddy offensive line could finally figure some things out. We do have the Cardinals on the slate again. Falcons are visiting Arizona, over under 48.5. That one is packed with guys that I want to play, and it probably looks to be the most stacked game on the slate. Probably going to land with the highest collective ownership, if I had to guess. Those are the three big ones. There are a couple more in that 45.5, 46.5 point range. I like Bucks at Panthers. I think that could go over the 45.5 point total. Crucial division matchup. Both teams have some leaks on defense. Buccaneers getting healthier on offense. So I do like that one.
I have Pittsburgh and Detroit at a 51.5 point over under. And
Mm.
I mean, that's
That one is higher than 49.5. You're right about that.
yeah,
But
that one's up
it's
there too.
also a 7 point favorite
Yeah,
in favor of the Lions there. I just don't know if that's like a great game environment. It might just be all Lions.
sure. Devin, are you feeling anything? Maybe we can get into it here and talk about our quarterbacks here for our cash game plays. But are you before we do that? Are you feeling here anything with these games and anything that hasn't been mentioned that should be on the radar?
No, I mean, I think, well, there's one. I think Jets Saints in the dome over 40.5. Brady Cook didn't look terrible last week, guys. I mean, he looked better than Phillip Rivers, which isn't saying much, but like he moved the ball, and that's more than we can. I'm not saying we should play him in DFS, but like if you're betting over unders, I think Tyler Shuck looks good. Neither of these defenses care at all. I'm not opposed to the over 40.5. The Jets have allowed 48 and 34 the last two games, so I think that game could be a shootout.
I have one Best Ball Mania team left alive, and I have Brees Hall and Alvin Kamara on it. And we're waiting to see here if Alvin Kamara is going to be playing or not, or if it's going to be the Audric Estime and Evan Hull show that out of that Saints backfield. But let's dive in here for our cash game quarterback plays. And Phil, tell me why you're not just going to put Jacoby Brissett here at 5,300. We've been riding the Brissett train of late. To me, I'm seeing that one stand out pretty strong.
Yep, I'm not going to tell you why I'm not riding the Jacoby Brissett train because I'm riding it. I think it's pretty easy. I mean, 9 straight games with at least 20 DraftKings points, at least 40 attempts in 6 straight. Betting against them at this point is kind of like if you're at the roulette wheel and red keeps coming up like 8 or 9 times in a row, and you're like, black is due, and it's just not coming out black. You keep doubling down and losing. So I think you got to play Brissett at 5,300. The price keeps coming down somehow. It's just getting silly. I guess if you think Brissett finally crashes in this spot, which I don't know why he would, against Atlanta, who's banged up and pretty soft against the pass these days. CJ Stroud is 5,500. I don't know if you want to pay $200 more for Stroud, but Houston is playing really well. When the matchup is trustworthy, he's playing against this Raiders team that I can only assume is trying to get Pete Carroll fired at this point.
I don't know that this is a Stroud game. Stroud games are like, I don't know that they feel any threat against the Raiders. And that's the problem. It's like, this seems like 210 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, he's not going to run. And I think it's Jacoby Brissett or Tyler Shuck. Trevor Lawrence just cooked this Jets defense last week and threw for 330 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Shuck hasn't been bad. I mean, he's been putting up volume. If I just look up his last stats, the last couple games, it's decent, and he still has a lot to play for. So 272-1 last week against a far better team in Carolina than he's facing this week. I think he has, I think he can put up 270-2 this week. I mean, the concern I have for Jacoby Brissett And with Tyler Shuck, he's run for 30 yards or more in each of his last 2 games. I like Brissett. I've liked him the last couple weeks. What shape is this Atlanta team in? Because like a lot of Brissett's, how do I say this? Performance has been through complete garbage time. They've fallen behind by 3 touchdowns in the first half, and they're just throwing the rest of the game. Is that the game plan this week? Maybe. Or are they just going to keep throwing regardless? I don't know. That would be
I
the
think I think
only
they're going to
concern.
keep throwing. They're going to keep throwing regardless. They have no semblance of a running game. They lost another running back last week. I think the 40 pass attempts per game is kind of part of the game plan, no matter what. And I think you have to trust that Atlanta is going to put up a big score on them, even if it's a competitive game. Atlanta's not going to struggle to score points. I don't think. I mean, that Arizona defense has been putrid these last couple of weeks.
Agreed. But the coverage theoretically will be softer than it, or will be less soft than it was in these garbage time performances. That's all. I think I lean slightly to Shuck just because of the rushing upside. I like both of these guys though. I just doesn't seem like a Stroud week, and I played Stroud last week in FanDuel and won. So like, yay me. Um, but it just I think it's one of those two for me.
I mean, aren't those two games pretty much the same thing, except for there's clearly, obviously, better skill players in the Atlanta Arizona game? It kind of strikes that way to me. Of very much similar, both teams in both games are just done, but they're fun bad. Whereas you talk about the Raiders, there we saw it last week with the Eagles, where we get some of these, and we saw it early in the season with the Chiefs, and sometimes against the Raiders in particular. But some of these bad teams, the other team doesn't feel threatened at all, and they basically sit on the ball starting at halftime, and you just don't get there unless you get one random guy that has 2 touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah, that's the worry.
What about the bottom of the board? What about Gardner Minshew at 4,500? Now we saw Rashee Rice pop up with potential concussion, and so I don't know if he's going to be there or not. But that very much, the air is out all the way out of the balloon for the Chiefs there. But you insert Gardner Minshew, and Minshew's playing with his hair on fire a little bit of how many opportunities he's going to get, and I think that might be interesting against a Titans team that we've seen give up some huge days in the passing game. And then, I mean, if you really want to, it's probably a GPP conversation here on Quinn Ewers at 4,000 flat against the Bengals defense. That's been horrible.
Absolutely not.
Not in cash. Let's look at cash running backs. Devin, what are you doing with the running backs here? Because I think seeing at the top of the board, you've got Achane in a choice matchup. That maybe that is the way they attack the Bengals. You got Bijan Robinson in the game we've already talked about. What direction are you going here for your running backs in cash games?
Is this crazy? I mean, I don't know that I'm targeting the Bengals this week, and maybe that's crazy. But they have been playing a little bit better defensively than what they were several weeks ago. And if I look at the last, I don't know, let's just call it the last 4 games. So going back to let's just pick week 11. And I look at fantasy points allowed against running backs. They're at 12. So they're not like as bad as what they were early on in the season. They're starting a lot of rookies, a lot of like just bad players, but it's still a team that maybe it's because of the offense that's scoring points, or maybe because they're falling behind so early. I don't know, but I don't know that I'm paying up for Achane just because I have no idea what Quinn Ewers is going to be. I think it's almost impossible to know what a guy who he's the highest recruit ever. Didn't really pan out in college. Was okay, but then was a 7th round pick. And how many quarterbacks that have started this year effectively moved the ball in their first start? Like none of them. So I just don't think a seventh round guy is going to be a difference maker. He doesn't have the arm strength to throw the ball downfield. So I'm out on Achan. I'm starting. I think I'm starting with Bijan Robinson. I think the Falcons run the ball pretty heavily against Arizona this week. It's scary going with Bijan just because of some of the volatility that you get when you do play him. But at 8,700, I think the price is completely fair, as well as the upside. Both him and Jameer Gibbs are really good plays. I think I just prefer Robinson ever so slightly because of that Arizona defense that seems to just have completely collapsed. Looking elsewhere, I think if you're looking down, there's a couple names that are at least intriguing. One of those is Kenneth Gainwell. He had 20 touches last week, so 80 yards, caught 7 passes. So if he's catching 7 passes, he had 6 the week before that, which like really helps his floor going forward. And at 5,100, I think is really intriguing. In a game where Pittsburgh is likely going to have to throw pretty heavily on the road against Detroit. And then the last name that I'll throw out there, it's kind of ugly. Like you could easily spend up at like take a Gibbs Robinson approach, but Javonte Williams at 6,400 against the Chargers. I've liked targeting the Chargers most of the season against the run. They've been extremely up and down all year, and I think that there's an opportunity for Williams to at least find the end zone and Dallas to put up some points this week.
What are you feeling, Phil?
Yep, a lot of the same names. I'm still a little bit split on what to do with Achan. I think that is probably the linchpin of the slate, and I think it's probably what the folks out there watching and listening are going to care about the most because everybody's looking at this Cincinnati matchup. Everybody would have been playing Achan if there wasn't a change from Tua. Maybe it's not the slam dunk that it was before. Now that we have to wonder like what Quinn Ewers is going to look like, but maybe I'm getting myself into trouble again because last week I asked this rhetorical question about Kenny Pickett, and that was how much worse could Kenny Pickett be than the 2025 version of Geno Smith? And
A lot.
it turns out the answer was a lot. I think the Raiders had 66 passing yards last week.
I think he had 2.4 yards per attempt.
Yeah, it could go that way.
Like he was going to get another ring from the Eagles. I mean,
yeah, it could go that way for Quinn Ewers for sure. Or maybe he could keep that. So here's one thing I will say is that I trust Mike McDaniel to scheme some plays to HN more than I trust, who is it, Greg Olson for like the 10th time.
Yeah, but if McDaniel thinks he's getting fired, it depends who's making this call as far as Quinn Ewers starting. If it's McDaniel, I can believe that. If it's somebody else, McDaniel knows he's fired. Is he going to really care?
I think I don't know. It's odd, just an odd change because they'd won 4 in a row. They won 5 of 6. They were one of the hottest teams in the league, right. And then they got into a freezing weather game. And I mean, you got grizzled Aaron Rodgers who, Aaron Rodgers like ice running through his veins, and then you've got Tua on the other side. I mean, I thought it was really funny seeing some of the things on social media where you could tell people bet before the game that they saw the Dolphins coming in hot, and then as soon as the ball kicked off, they realized I just bet on Tua in a freezing weather game against Aaron Rodgers. What have I done with my life?
Right. Yeah. So at this stage of the game, I have a slight lean where I would favor HN because if McDaniel does try to keep it simple for Ewers, he's going to look to get the ball into HN's hands. And then it's up to the Cincinnati linebackers to stop him. And I like HN in that matchup a lot better than I like the Cincinnati linebackers. So I think at this stage of the game, I'm still interested in playing him. I think you could pair him with Bijan Robinson. And I did have Gainwell on my list as well. You know, he's got at least 6 catches and 16 DraftKings points in 4 out of his last 5. It wasn't even just last week. that he started coming on. He's got like a 29-point game mixed in there. Little sketchy for cash games because you know that he's only going to play half the snaps, so it doesn't feel great. But that role is like exactly what I envisioned for Jaylen Warren and why I was so heavily invested in Jaylen Warren. Aaron Rodgers does get to the point every year where he's like a running back, pass catcher, kingmaker, and he's doing it with Gainwell. So 5,100 is definitely a good price for him. And just to put a bow on the Bijan Robinson thing, it does look like Raheem Morris might have stopped getting cute, and now he's doing everything that he can to like save his job. Robinson took 89% of the snaps, took a carry from the goal line, and scored on it last week. If that sticks, he's really going to crush that Arizona matchup. Chunk plays will ensue.
Phil, your favorite guy, Michael Carter, 5,400. I don't know how it's going to shake out with Amari DiMercato. We've seen the Cardinals traditionally with Drew Petzing utilize a dual backfield, but I mean, if it's every touch the way it was last week in a game that we have already talked about excessively, I mean that could be a direction to go. Maybe not in cash though.
I was not wrong. I was 1 week late on Michael Carter.
That's how it always is, man. Tell you what, it always is. Wide receivers. Let's look at our wide receivers. And Devin, how are you building out your wide receiver board in cash games? Actually, I think Phil's turn to go first. Phil, what is you looking at here for cash game wide receivers?
Sure. So I'm going to assume that Marvin Harrison Jr. plays. He was back at practice today, limited. Otherwise, I would have started out with Michael Wilson to pair with Jacoby Brissett. Since we're paying way up at running back, have no choice but to tackle the mid range at wide receiver. From a point per dollar standpoint, I think the name that jumped out first was DK Metcalf. He's like one of the few glaring values. Only the Cowboys have allowed more DraftKings points to wide receivers this season than the Lions. We saw Puka Nacua go off last week, Ryan Flournoy and CeeDee Lamb the week before that, Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson the week before that, and Wan'Dale Robinson the week before that. I could stop there, but you guys are getting the picture. This is a good matchup for Metcalf. I'm always ready for old Artie Smith to pull the rug by throwing to no one but his tight ends and fullbacks. But Metcalf has been pretty reliable lately. I think we could trust him as the only Steelers wide receiver to take advantage of this matchup. Then we've got Chris Olave at 6,500 is about as high as I could go. The Jets are slightly less bad against the pass than they are against the run, but they've generally quit playing on all phases of defense. Olave is already among the league leaders in targets. He's right up there with the St. Browns and the Nakuas and the Smith and Jigbas of the world. Quietly having a really good season. I'm not sure how many targets or how many more targets he could get, but Devon Vele was ruled out today. He's been averaging 6.5 targets over the last 4. Those have to consolidate, and usually what happens is they don't go 1-to-1 to whoever is replacing Vele in the lineup. They usually, a couple of them go to the best player in the offense first. So that's Olave. I think he's locked into like 15 to 20 points in this spot. And with the Jets as the opponent, certainly wouldn't rule out his best game of the season. Then at wide receiver 3, I had Cortland Sutton at 5,700. I'm pretty sure the Venn diagram of the people who listen to this show and also listen to the Audible with Cecil and Sigmund is probably like one big circle. But if you've been listening to the Audible, you've heard Cecil say recently that there's kind of been a mandate from the coaching staff to get Cortland Sutton 10 targets in each game. And Cecil is obviously very close to the team. So when he said that, he had my attention. And sure enough, the last 2 weeks, exactly 10 targets in each of the last 2 games, touchdowns in 2 of his last 3. Jacksonville's weakness on defense is against perimeter wide receivers. They're allowing 5.7 more fantasy points per game to outside receivers over expectation. I think Sean Payton is a smart coach, smart enough to continue to do what's working and to attack that weakness with Cortland Sutton. So I'm in on those three guys. I think there are some other situations to watch, but I'll kick it over to Devin and I'll see if they get mentioned.
Um, yeah, I'm playing Jamar Chase. I think it's not all that difficult to find a way to fit him in at 8,600. The way that I'm doing it is really between two players, and one is yikes. They both are not very good players, but if Teteroa McMillan misses, I think Jalen Coker at 4,400 is interesting. We've Coker had 60 yards last week, did lead the team, but the other player that I'm targeting at 3,100 is Kevin Austin for the Saints. 3 for 33 last week, should see a bigger role with Devon Vele out. I know that Phil was talking about Olave, and I completely understand that. I think Olave is a great play as well, but at 3,100, like the barrier to entry that you actually need is like 3 for 33 almost makes value. And he only saw 30% of the snaps last week. So again, we are recording on Wednesday this week. We are not recording on Thursday. So a lot can change between now and then, but Austin is my favorite guy way down on the board. I think Sutton is a fine play. I don't know that I can get behind DK Metcalf. He's just never a guy that like I can ever really get all that excited about. I understand it, but it's just like, not for me. Nico Collins, 7,500 is intriguing. 15 or more DraftKings points in 3 of his last 5 games. Hasn't seen the volume that we would want to see. 3 receptions, 4 receptions, 5 receptions, 3 receptions. Where in the 3 games before that, he had 9, 7, and 7. So is this a week as the Texans try to figure out their passing game going forward that they try to get him more involved? I think that's it. It's a little bit intriguing this week. And then the last name that I will mention is let's go. No, I'm not going there. Let's go to tight ends.
I think there's one more name that we have to talk about in this wide receiver section. Justin Jefferson is 6K.
Pass.
He was 7,900 as recently as week 10. He's
Pass.
6K against the Giants. I mean, how many times have you guys heard me say on this show that the Giants play man coverage? They play it poorly. They're going to get
you know
burned
who
by
also
such and
does
such
that?
wide receiver.
Washington, and he had 3.1 fantasy points against them.
And
The
Dallas.
game before Dallas, 4.2.
That's why we're talking about it, but it kind of became
4.2, 3.1, 2.4, 8.8, 11.1, 7.7. The guy hasn't reached 12 DraftKings points in 6 games. He's overpriced at 6K.
He's the best wide receiver in the NFL.
It is. It's so baffling because when you watch, it's JJ McCarthy is not playing bad, and he goes anybody else, he's putting it on anybody else, and whenever it's Jefferson, he's missing him by 15 yards, or he does hit him and Jefferson drops it. It's bizarre of what's going on there, but
there's no way you can pay 6K in cash for Justin Jefferson.
I think in this Giants matchup and the way it's become kind of a national story that McCarthy can't hit him to save his life, I think they made the point of getting Jefferson involved early and often. I think at 6K, he'll manage to get, even if he only catches a touchdown and a couple of passes, I think he'll manage 12 to 15 points and not kill you. And the upside is there because he's Justin Jefferson.
As a GPP play, sure. As a cash game play, he could have 4 points and completely ruin your lineup.
I don't think it's ridiculous to consider him in the same realm as some of the guys that we talked about.
I think Chris Olave's floor is massively higher.
Agree.
So
just saying.
Anyway.
It does end up being, it feel like more often than not when everybody is on one storyline, it ends up being the opposite. And if everybody's on the storyline of JJ McCarthy unable to connect with Justin Jefferson, it does end up more often than not feel like goes the other direction. Mike Evans at 6,300. He only needs, I think it's like 234 yards per game over the last 3 to get to 1,000 or
stop
something
with
like
this. Like,
I mean, it looked like in the Falcons game that Baker Mayfield was certainly going to give it a shot on trying to get his guy up to 1,000 yards. But yeah, no, I hear you.
yay, you average 57 yards a game. Good job.
When you only play 6 games, though, it's pretty good feat there.
Yeah, sure.
Let's look at tight ends. And where are we going to go here with tight ends? Are we going to go with Trey McBride Express, or is 74 or 7,600 too much to step into the Trey McBride territory?
Go ahead, Phil.
Too much for me in cash with the way that I spent at running back and kind of like the mid to upper mid tier at wide receiver. So I was going to go with Harold Fannin again, 4,500. Came into last week with a 28% target share since Shador Sanders took over, which is monstrous for a tight end. And then he gets 14 out of 31 targets last week. That's 45%. Only resulted in 12 DraftKings points, but if you're going to get that type of volume, that's going to be a floor game. And I don't think that you could legitimately get a shot anywhere else in your lineup at like 15 targets at 4,500. So Fannin looks good. And then in terms of floor, it's a little bit scary because it's another guy catching passes from JJ McCarthy, but I needed like a real 3K crapper to round out this lineup with the running back and wide receiver spending that I did. And I landed on TJ Hawkinson, who I think is good for like 10 to 12 points here. He's got 11.9, 9.2, 10.6 in each of the last 3 games. Those have all come against opponents that have had some trouble defending tight ends. The Giants don't really scare anyone in that department. There's no type of ceiling here, but I think the floor for somewhere between like 8 and 12 DraftKings points is there for Hawkinson at 3K.
Yeah, Hawkinson's going to be popular, I think, just because of that 3K price point. Fannin is going to be popular just because of the volume and Cleveland having to pass, although I don't love him this week. The 4,500 pricing is a little bit awkward. I think Darren Waller at 3,500 is intriguing against Cincinnati. We've talked about Cincinnati's issues against tight ends. Quinn Ewers threw the ball 60 times to Gunnar Helm in his final season at Texas last year, so clearly is capable of 60 receptions for a college tight end is a lot. That's up there with some of the most in the country. So, does Ewers just look pretty heavily towards his tight end this week? I think that's certainly possible.
Kyle Pitts is going to draw attention because of that big blowout spot on Thursday Night Football. The reality of it is he was playing very, very well before that game, and he's not even really playing tight end. He's kind of basically playing in Drake London's role, and that one at 5,000 I think is pretty interesting.
London is back, though?
Is London back for sure? He's back to practice. I don't know that that's something that we're going to have to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not, if he's back, I don't know that I love Pitts at 5K.
The other one I think that's a little bit interesting, Juwan Johnson at 4,000. We talked about options with New Orleans where they could go with Vele out. Maybe it's just the college connection there with Tyler Shuck and Juwan Johnson, the like 8th year NFL vet who was college teammates with Tyler Shuck. And I always laugh when I look at my sheet and maybe Andrew Beck always pops in here at 4,000 and it just cracks me up because it's like Andrew Beck, the way that my sheet is generated, it must be pulling from FanDuel because he must not be a tight end in DraftKings. But
I have no idea who Andrew Beck is.
He's some fullback he's a fullback for the Jets, I think. But it's always like he's sitting here between Juwan Johnson and Brenton Strange. Like every week, it's like these guys that you consider playing, and Andrew Beck's like in the list.
Do you need a
it's
list?
Week 16, Devin.
I can give you a list.
Our friend Dan Hindery generates a report for me, and it proves to be pretty useful. So I appreciate that. So that's what I use. But all right, let's open up the board here. Let's look at GPP Plays. 4 quarterbacks, GPP. What are you feeling here, Devin? What are you going to do with your quarterbacks at GPP Plays?
Jared Goff, 6,300 at home against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has had issues stopping the pass consistently for a lot of the year. And the stacking opportunities in this game are pretty substantial. So I think Goff is in a pretty good week. I had him last week. I mentioned him on the show, but 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 309 the week before that with a touchdown. So this Lions team is really starting to put things together. Defensively, they still have some issues, which is actually good for Goff. But I think he's probably my top guy that I'm looking at there. Looking down, there's not a lot of cheap guys that I love this week. Could Gardner Minshew put up enough? Maybe at 4,500 against Tennessee. Like, Tennessee hasn't stopped anybody all year, and we've seen Minshew put up some big games in the past. And then the only other guy that I have on my list that we haven't mentioned so far is Bo Nix at 6,100. I mean, Jacksonville's run defense is just, it's been the biggest surprise in the NFL this season. This was a defense that really was thought about as like a pass specialist defense, and they've, because of their linebacker play with Devin Lloyd and Foyesade Aluakan. I'm sure I mispronounced both of the. I didn't mispronounce Devin Lloyd, but I'm sure I mispronounced the second name. They've been stopping everybody against the run, so I think that it's intriguing for Bo Nix to really come out and have a big passing game this week.
I like that point because I think that this Denver Jacksonville game could be an underrated shootout. I see a lot of consternation around Trevor Lawrence, obviously coming off that massive week last week, but he's been very good for the last 2+ months. And that game does strike me as Denver's defense hasn't quite been as good as advertised over the last couple weeks. We saw on Sunday Night Football, Marcus Mariota have a very good game against that Denver unit. Teams have been moving the ball against Denver, and I think that Jacksonville-Denver could be an underrated shootout. What do you have, Phil? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so the answer to Gardner Minshew is yes. I think if you don't think that he and Andy Reid could dial up some fun stuff and score some fantasy points, I think your imagination is lacking. It's going to be fun. Just have fun. They're playing Tennessee. That team just got mauled by Brock Purdy and Shedeur Sanders in back-to-back weeks. So I don't think there is like a good number of cheap quarterbacks that I think will get some ownership. We talked a little bit about Shuck and McCarthy, Minshew, even Kirk Cousins. So like there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks in that range that are sharing ownership. None of them should get too high. So it's not like the crowd is going to be on Minshew because he's the only cheap guy. Speaking of Cousins, he showed last week that he still has it in him against the right opponent. Hung nearly 30 DraftKings points on Tampa Bay in a surprise win. It could go bad if Bijan Robinson doesn't leave any stats for the rest of the guys in Atlanta, but 4 out of the 5 quarterbacks to face Arizona in recent weeks have thrown for at least 3 touchdowns. This game is in a dome. Really nice spot for Cousins, who I think is looking to convince some other team out there that he could start for them next season. So he's got some motivation. And
he's going to be Cleveland's quarterback.
Oh, man, it is headed that way, isn't it?
We certainly need one.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield, 5,700. Nothing about the Carolina matchup really jumps out. Carolina is actually kind of tough on opposing quarterbacks, but I think that Mayfield's price and projected ownership are both based on what he's done this season. and not what he can do with a full complement of weapons. Mike Evans looked great last week. Egbuka looked better than he has. McMillan, coming back from a broken neck, looked great. Chris Godwin is getting back closer to normal. So, with all these guys in the lineup, Mayfield went for 20 DraftKings points last week, and that Tampa Bay defense looks so bad that I think we could see this offense look a lot like it did down the stretch of last season, where they won people a lot of money. So, I think Mayfield might go overlooked there.
Lions have been horrible against the pass, and maybe Aaron Rodgers channels a little bit of the discount double check days of walking in there to Detroit, a team that he had some pretty notable moments against throughout his career. I think that one of the keys for this slate is figuring out the motivation level for the Chiefs and the Bengals, because they're both in matchups that they could just roll it out there and say, our season's over, let's just go out and throw for 450 yards, or it could be the opposite, a death march, and let's just play nobody we care about at all. And so I think that those are two that could end up being a real key for how the slate plays out. But Joe Burrow at 6,500, you're already talking about Jamar Chase as an option there. I mean, that could be a direction to go as well. And Burrow could just say, season's over, I'm going to throw 5 touchdowns now for the heck of it. Let's look at running backs here for our GPP play running backs. And Phil, I'm going to go back to you again. What are you looking at here with running backs for your GPP plays?
James Cook. We talked a lot a couple of weeks ago about this
Browns
rush. That was your guy.
Yeah, that was the top name on my board.
Yeah, I mean, you said it actually a couple of weeks ago, Devin, when I talked about how the Browns were starting to let up some uncharacteristically strong rushing games. Malik Collins, their defensive tackle, went out of the lineup. He's on IR, and ever since that happened, it's kind of been all downhill.
There's a lot of arm tackles in Cleveland. A lot. It's like you see guys that are just not giving full effort.
Yeah. Yeah, DeAndre Swift last week paid it off, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cook is playing really well, shook off back-to-back games with 2 fumbles to score 34 against New England in that comeback last week. But overall, that Buffalo running game looks pretty locked in. I think if I were like laying odds for the running back most likely to hit the 100-yard bonus on this slate, I think I'd give it to Cook. And he does have multi-touchdown upside. He's just got to hold on to the ball as he crosses that goal line. From there, Jahmyr Gibbs, just because who else has a 58-point game in their bag at the running back position? I don't know if he'll – I thought at first when I looked at Achane against Cincinnati that he would go overlooked. I think that him and Gibbs will probably kind of chop the ownership at that price point, with Bijan being more popular than both of them. But I think that's
as of
good.
Wednesday, and it's Wednesday, so numbers are very early. Achane is much less rostered than Bijan or Gibbs, and I think it's because of team totals. Like when you factor in the Sims as far as like who has the upside, does Achane. Do you see a world where Miami scores 28? I don't think so. I think that's where his roster percentage is like 10% right now, where the other two are in the mid 20s.
Yeah, I think that Robinson probably ends up in the upper 20s and the other two probably mid to low 20s, because you're right about the Sims and how they inform those early ownership runs. But the field, I think I've said this before, they double and triple count matchup, and all they know is the Bengals are lousy against the run. So I do think that Achane will get up there, but I don't know. Maybe Quinn Ewers will scare him off. But the Steelers are just okay against the run. They're nothing special, and that's who Gibbs has this week. So if we do get any discount, maybe between Achane and Robinson at the same price point, or the fact that he's coming off of a bad game, even though it looks like if you look at his game logs, every other game he goes for 40 plus. And he is due this week. You always want to play Jameer Gibbs in tournaments. And then my last guy is Amari in Hampton, 5,800. That's if Quentin Williams misses. I think the calculus on how a lot of points get scored in that game changes. Hampton's been outsnapped by Kamani Vidal pretty handily since he returned. But I think that's because they don't trust Hampton to pass protect. They do trust Vidal. But Hampton has more carries, despite the fact that he's only playing about a third of the snaps. He's run with more efficiency. He's now 3 weeks removed from IR. If Williams misses, I do expect Dallas to regress defensively against the run. And Hampton's got the explosiveness. And then the last thing I'll say is I'll be keeping an eye on the beat reports coming out of New Orleans because I don't know how to read that backfield with Audric Estime and Evan Hall. But I do think that it's important because those guys are cheap and the Jets really are that bad. Without looking, I think they've allowed the most schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs over the last 5 weeks. So
I have that. They have allowed the most fantasy points since week 11. They are allowing 37.5 fantasy points to the position, which is 4 more points than the next closest team.
there you go.
What I would say is I like Hall a little bit more than Estime, but we'll see. I don't believe in Audric Estime at all, but
Conceptually, looking at skill set coming out as prospects, you would think that Hull would slot in to be the receiving back and Esme would be more the goal line back. But then last week, Esme got 3 targets and Hull did not get any targets. So that was my first read when I wrote up the backfields, that I expect that direction. But then when I dig into the numbers, they're giving Esme targets and not Hull, and so I don't know what's going on.
But Hull wasn't really a receiver at Northwestern either, so he was more of a workhorse type running. I don't know. I think we know what Estime is at this point, and it's not overly pretty. At least you have some unknown with Hull. James Cook, top name on the board. Phil, I hate you. I think Bucky Irving at 6,700 is pretty intriguing. Carolina, we're talking about recent trends. They started out the year extremely hot against the run. This has historically been a very bad run defense, and since week 8, they've really fallen off, and they're allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Irving had 16 touches last week. I think if there is a big Bucky Irving game, it is this week. He's been okay since returning. He hasn't had a monster game yet, but 19 touches, 18 touches, 19 touches with at least 15 carries in all 3 games. It's clearly his backfield. And last week against Atlanta was a little bit disappointing, but I think he bounces back in a big way this week. The other name that I'll throw out there, you guys are going to give me an intervention if I name him, Breece Hall. So I'm not going to do that. Aaron Jones at 5,200 is going to get some love, but I just never play Aaron Jones at this point. I don't think the touches are there to actually play him. So if you're playing Aaron Jones at the 15 to 20% roster that he's going to be, good luck with that. I'd rather play Kenneth Gainwell in that similar price point and similar ownership stand. And then the last name that I will throw out there, it's not a lot. It's I think we kind of covered it. I mean, the top names, Robinson and Gibbs, are going to be popular for good reason. I think they're both in good spots.
Who's the hottest running back over the last 2 weeks in the NFL?
You tell us.
Well, maybe not the hottest, but one of the hottest. Tony Pollard is one of the hottest running backs over the last 2 weeks in the NFL. The Chiefs, I mean, we know traditionally the Chiefs are a strong defense. I mean, Chris Jones found out in that postgame presser that they were eliminated from the playoffs, so maybe they don't even know where they stood in the playoffs. But Tony Pollard coming in very, very hot the last 2 weeks. It might catch a team that is just their soul has been ripped out without Mahomes, and he could continue that there in that spot. If you really wanted to get risky, Imari DiMercado at 4,600. If you wanted to go kind of maybe the same argument as the Saints there, it's risky. It's risky. But I would feel a little bit better about having a Cardinals running back and speculating on which Cardinals running back hits hot over which Saints running back it ends up being. But that's just me. Wide receivers, Devin. What are your GPP plays? Wide receivers.
This is where I love Nico Collins at 7,500. I think he has as much upside as the guys that are $1,000 more than him. I think he's in a really good spot. We talked about him in the cash segment that he could have a big game. Drake London, if he goes at 7K, Atlanta's not going to play him unless he's ready to go, which I think he should be. And then CeeDee Lamb seems underpriced at 7,800. So, 20 or more 20 or more DraftKings points in each of his last three, 100 yards or more in each of his last three. So I think at 7,800, getting a $600 or $800 discount off of St. Brown / Chase with Dallas in a pretty good matchup against the Chargers, like this game should be pretty high scoring. You could stack this a number of different ways. I think that Lamb is intriguing. Going down the board a little bit, Jaden Higgins really disappointed last week. He only had 1.4 fantasy points against Arizona, but at 4,100 now, I think he's back to being a guy who, like, you're taking on risk, but, he's top 10 fantasy points in 3 of his last 6. So if he tops 10 at 4,100, if he finds the end zone, I think he's in a good spot. Jalen Coker, if Ted McMillan is out, even if he's not, 15 points or more in each of his last 2, which is a pretty good number. And then the last guy that I will throw out there, I think taking a chance on one of these Saints guys, and I mentioned Kevin Austin. I think he's the guy, but it could be Mason Tipton, although Tipton's already seeing snaps, and he really won't see additional snaps. It'll just be he'll have to see targets, and he really hasn't done that all year. So I think Austin is the guy that if there is upside to one of these receivers, it would be him.
Yeah.
Right. So I really would have liked Rashee Rice at low ownership, and I guess I'll leave the light on for him, but he's not playing if I'd had to guess, right? Because if he entered the protocol reporting symptoms Monday, that kind of puts him behind the 8 ball. But I just know that Gardner Minshew loves dumping off to running backs, and that's kind of how the Chiefs use Rice in the passing game. So it would have meshed well. I guess smash Travis Kelce if Rice is out, because a lot of those short area looks would go to him. Jameson Williams, 6,400. Pittsburgh has struggled against outside receivers all season. And outside of that weird 0-point game against the Giants in week 12 that I still can't believe, Williams has at least 17 DraftKings points in every game since week 9. And he's gone over 27 in 3 of those games. He might even be okay for cash at 6,400. But this is definitely a good week to see that ceiling against Pittsburgh. Adonai Mitchell, 4,500. Really impressive that he commanded 10 targets last week and posted a solid 17.4 DraftKings points with Brady Cook at quarterback. He's been a target earner since joining the Jets. He can make explosive plays, long catch of 20-plus yards in each of his last 4. I know Devin's a John Mechie guy and not an A.D. Mitchell guy, and Mechie actually projects okay this week also, but I think we've got to give the edge to Mitchell at this point just based on what he's done on the field. Drake London, 7K. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that he's back. It was a limited practice today, and I think Raheem Morris said we'll see what he does in practice this week. So they were kind of non-committal. But if Pitt's got the Drake London targets last week and London plays, then I think London is going to get the Drake London targets this week, and that makes him a pretty good play. Finally, Jordan Addison, 5K. What if J.J. McCarthy do take advantage of this great matchup and Justin Jefferson continues to stink? I think that Addison would be the beneficiary there. He's obviously a big play receiver. Wouldn't blame anybody for playing Jalen Naylor at this point. I mean, he seems to have something going with McCarthy. And I guess on that note, if I'm playing McCarthy in tournaments, which I think I am going to be, I'm going to be triple stacking him. So two receivers and a tight end, two receivers and Aaron Jones receiver tight end. There's a lot of ways you could do it there, but the Minnesota offense is set up in as good a spot as possible, no matter what you think of JJ McCarthy.
He's played Dallas and Washington. Let's wait and see against a good defense.
And we don't have to. It's 1 week, and now he's playing the Giants. It's another bad defense.
But they're not anywhere close to as bad as those two.
They're pretty bad.
Against the run, yeah. Against the pass, not nearly as bad. I don't know. I'm not wasting hard-earned money on JJ McCarthy.
So I like the Jameson Williams call out there. I almost think that if you're not playing Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown, you almost have to play Jameson Williams because you're already betting on that. They've hyper consolidated that offense with Laporta out. I mean, David Montgomery's kind of almost fallen out of the rotation there. So it's really just the targets are going to Amon-Ra St. Brown, to Williams, and to Gibbs. So kind of I feel like the pivot, if you're not going to play Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown, you would be basically saying Jameson Williams just goes wild here in that situation. One of these Chargers wide receivers, I don't know. Maybe none of them have to do anything. Maybe not. It's not there for anything. But you've got Trey Harris there at 3,300. He's been playing a lot more. He's got a questionable designation, so maybe I don't know what's going on there. Keenan Allen at 4,800. We just haven't seen any real volume that you can bet on going to Keenan Allen. I mean, Ladd McConkey's really, really struggled over the last period. But if we're talking about targeting this Dallas matchup, one of these wide receivers you would think it'd have to be. And you started off talking about Rashee Rice there. If he's out, maybe Xavier Worthy at 4,400 might be a direction to go there. We saw last week Hollywood Brown was out of that game. Maybe it's Worthy that kind of steps into that running back proximity role. We've seen that occasionally in his game. Maybe that is in play. Tight ends. What do we have for tight ends here in our GPP plays?
Travis Kelce, easiest play on the board. Look at what Gardner Minshew did with Brock Bowers last year. Like, he's going to throw to tight ends over and over and over and over and over again. It's like I would be shocked, and it's not looking like it will be. But Kelce right now has drawn next to zero ownership, and I think as people look into that more and more, that's going to change. But as of Wednesday, he's going way under the radar, and that's not right. I think Trey McBride is a good GPP play this week, and I know it's point chasing a little bit, but that point differential that you're getting from McBride compared to other tight ends has to be recognized. And yeah, he doesn't have the upside that we didn't think he did, but he put up 40 last week. But is he going to put up 40 again? No, but could he have a pretty big gap between the next closest tight end? Yeah, he could. And that's what you're hoping for.
Yep. I will go with did you call out Darren Waller in cash games before?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he was on my list for GPPs, and I think you might have convinced me even further after you talked about Ewers and how much he loved Gunnar Helm last year. I think that Waller is going to get the Quinn Ewers discount, whereas he would have came in very chalky had he not.
Yep.
So let's see if Ewers leans on his tight end the way a lot of young quarterbacks do when they're early on in their career. Kelce, we both already mentioned. Only other name on my list is Brenton Strange, who busted last week in a pretty good matchup against the Jets, but he really wasn't needed that much, and I think it's a nice bounce back spot. The Broncos, we know they take away wide receivers, and that leaves the tight end alone, sometimes by design. I know that that's another thing that Cecil is constantly lamenting on the Audible, is tight ends getting over on the Broncos. So I think that Strange could have a pretty nice game.
Some revenge on the card. Evan Ingram going up against Jacksonville. Evan Ingram was released by the Jaguars, and there was some hard feelings, I think, from Evan Ingram there. And so if you're looking at GPP plays at 2,900, that might be in play there. The Jaguars have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to the tight end position. Let's do our stacks of the week. We're at the hour mark. We got to get out of here. Phil, what are you looking at your stack of the week?
Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, so the old school Buccaneers stack. And then I will run it back with Jalen Coker, who Devin mentioned.
Yeah,
Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, and let's go Jamison Williams. If you wanted to run it back with DK Metcalf, you certainly could.
Would you run it back with Kenneth Gainwell?
Yes, probably more than Metcalf.
I'll just go Jacoby Brissett, and I'll go Trey McBride here. We'll might be the chalk, but I do think that they are trying to break a record for McBride, and I think he's going to absolutely annihilate the catch record. He could do it in this game. He's close enough that he could break the Zach Ertz's catch record in this game. So I want Trey McBride, and I will ride Jacoby Brissett again. Bring it back with Bijan Robinson. I mean, he's lingering right there too. So just play the stars in that game. What is your discount play of the week, Phil?
I'm going to dig extra deep and give you Isaiah Hodgins for 3,200. He's running a lot of routes and seeing a lot of snaps. And if memory serves, he likes playing against Purple Laundry. I could remember a playoff win a couple years ago for the Giants in Minnesota, where Hodgins had like an 8-105-1 receiving line. I think he keeps it going against the guys who wear purple this week. So that's my my expert analysis. Isaiah Hodgins could beat.
Does not like the color purple. So, yeah. What do you have, Devin?
I really need to save these guys to the end, but I think it's Jalen Coker and Kevin Austin for me.
I'm going to go Gardner Minshew here in this spot. I think we see these veterans come in 1 week, and we've seen Tennessee get absolutely roasted. I think Minshew at 4,500 is my discount play of the week. That's what we've got. So check out the optimizer and do all those fun things. But Devin, why don't you send us out like the only way you can?
Sure. Week 16. I don't know what the schedule is going to be the rest of the year. We may do a live show on the day after Christmas. We're going to figure that out because we normally record on Thursdays. That's Christmas Day. We normally record our alternative is Wednesdays. A Tuesday show does nobody any good. So I don't know what the rest of the year looks like. If we don't talk to you before then, have a Merry Christmas. I hope everyone has a great holiday, spends time with family, and really gets some just recharge heading into 2026.